Welcome to this module on how to find bargain properties. What we're going to look at here is looking beyond just the actual property itself and what it is that you need to look for within the opportunities and within the area that helps you identify a bargain property. So before you even get to understand someone's situation or their scenario, you can actually just, by looking for the opportunities within your area, identify a bargain property. So let's have a little look at what we're going to cover in this module. We're going to look at knowing what a bargain property is. So what is it that makes a property a bargain? We're going to look into that to see how you can just, with a little bit of more knowledge and thinking, identify those bargain properties. I'm going to show you how to go out there and find bargain properties and where you should really be looking. What are the sorts of places that you can find these? We're then going to look at your weekly lead generation and how you put that onto a weekly tracking mechanism and how you can use that to make sure that you generate enough leads each and every week to get you to your property investment goal. And we're going to finish off with our top 3 actions to make sure that you're moving forward on a consistent basis. So first of all, let's look at property bargains and let's look at how you can really identify with a property bargain. The first key really is to understand your area, because without knowing your area particularly well, you might see a property, whether that's in on with an agent or in an auction or something like that. You might see a property and you might think, do you know what, that's a real bargain. It's on at a snatch of a price. But it could be that it's in a really bad part of town. It could be that it's in an area where something is about to happen. Some development opportunity that none of the neighbours want is about to take place. And so therefore, being able to relate to a property bargain, it's really essential that you get to know the area, that you understand what's happening within the area, so that you're not just looking at the price of the property and thinking, do you know what, that property is an absolute bargain. You need to be understanding it within the context of the area that you're investing in. And we've covered in some detail in some of the other modules how you get to know your area really well. So I really encourage you to really identify with that and get to know your area really well so that you can understand how you can identify at the drop of a hat whether a property is a bargain or not in terms of its price and where it's located. Sometimes you have to look beyond the obvious when it comes to property bargains. So for many people, they'll look at properties and they'll just see the price and the pictures. Sometimes it's looking beyond that and saying, okay, well, maybe the price is a price that's the same as other people's, but there might be some other opportunities within that that really identify it as a bargain. And how do you know that? Well, realistically, you need to be able to see things like understanding that the property is maybe on with an agent that's out of town. Being able to identify with that obvious sort of situation. Why is that a bargain? Simply because if the agent is out of town, they're not going to know the area so well. Equally, they might not be so bothered to come to the area to do as many viewings. They might just want to get rid of the property. Now, why would somebody advertise with a property that's with an agent out of town? Well, maybe they've moved to a different location and perhaps it's too much trouble for them to come back to the area, so they've just used an agent in their new town where they live. Now, that might seem really obvious, but for some people, when they're looking around, they don't look at those things. So sometimes it's the obvious things that we need to just keep an extra sharp eye for. So when you're trying to identify a property bargain, try and identify with some of the obvious things as well as some of the things that might not be quite so obvious. One of the other things about identifying a bargain is really looking at where there are problems. So this is where a lot of people might say, well, I don't want a problem. And that is what most people think. They don't want the problem. However, sometimes the problem isn't actually as big as it might appear. And that's what puts everyone else off. And that's where your opportunity is. So if there's a problem with the property, if you don't understand property particularly well yet, that's where you need to get the right team in place to make sure that you can identify whether the problem really is a big problem or whether it can be seen as a big problem, but it's actually not such a big problem. So being able to identify with problems and what other people see as the problem, as well as what the real problem is really quite essential when you're starting to try and identify property bargains. Another area of identifying a property bargain is really where, if you can think outside the box. So when I say think outside the box, I'm thinking about things like, if you see a property, most people look at a property and you think, okay, that's maybe a 2-bedroom terrace house, and it's on for the normal price of whatever other prices of houses are. But maybe it's a 2-bedroom end terrace house. Perhaps there's a bit of space to the side of it that the other properties don't have. Maybe there's an opportunity to have 2 entrances. Perhaps there's an opportunity to convert it to 2 flats and use some of the space at the end to make them quite good sized flats. And perhaps they would be worth a lot more if it was 2 flats rather than a 2-bedroom terrace. So by thinking outside of the box and looking at it and saying, what else could I do with it? Where is the opportunity within the property? So we're not looking necessarily at the scenario of the seller and whether they're motivated or not, because it could be that if we identify an opportunity within the property, it might be that we are actually quite happy to pay the full market price for something. And therefore we don't need to be looking at, can we negotiate this? Can we find a motivated person that's going to negotiate the price down? Because if there's sufficient enough opportunity within the property itself, if we can think outside the box and see where we can create space and use space and add value, perhaps there's an opportunity to pay what the seller wants, but still be able to make a considerable chunk of money either in capital or in cash flow. So thinking outside the box really will help you when it comes to identifying with property bargains. So let's have a look at how you go and find some of those property bargains. Well, the most obvious place to look, and some place that you're probably already looking, is with estate agents and letting agents. And the best place to start when you're looking for bargain properties is to, you can either go around and have a chat with the estate agents, and if you're looking for option opportunities, lease option opportunities, you might want to go in and speak with the agents and think about how you can approach them to find properties that might suit your circumstances. So whether you're looking for a lease option or an opportunity where there might be a bargain on a property, maybe the circumstances of that property is that it's empty. Maybe with an estate and letting agent, some of the opportunities around the property are where a property needs some work doing to it. Again, as I said earlier, perhaps when you're looking online, things that you look out for are, is the agent out of town? You can also look for opportunities when you're looking at the way that people market properties. Some agents are not particularly good at marketing the property particularly well. And if you know your area, you might see that some of them made a mistake and they're maybe advertising the property as a 3-bedroom property when it's actually a 4-bedroom property. Or it could be that they're advertising the property and it doesn't really have a very good description on it. So it's not encouraging people to inquire about it. So if you can identify with some of those elements when you're actually looking at the information online, you could pick out some bargains because of the pure fact that if you can see and you know your area well enough to see that the property isn't being advertised as it should be, and other people might not be looking at it because of that, then therefore you can identify with where there's an opportunity for you to go and work with agents to try and find the properties that will work for you. In terms of actually working with agents to do particular property deals on lease options, as we spoke about, Identifying with an empty property is a really good one, because an empty property is something where someone hasn't had to sell to move on, and therefore they may be very open to the idea of renting that property first before they sell it. Now, it's not guaranteed, but it's certainly worth asking the question. Not necessarily you're going to ask the question straight away. I would encourage you to go in and have a conversation, try and build some rapport with the agent, and try and identify with opportunities that they might have that you understand suit your circumstances, and see what they can find. So it could be that they've got properties for sale and for let at the same time. It might not just be that they're empty properties. It could be that they have properties where the vendor has already reduced the price, but they can't reduce it any further. Or maybe they can't reduce the price at all and it won't sell. There could be a variety of different reasons why an opportunity is sitting there right in front of you, and just by having a conversation with the estate agent, you can identify with opportunities that could work for you. Now, you can do the same with letting agents, because there are situations where letting agents have landlords that want to sell, and they have properties where landlords are maybe not maximising the rent. So you could go and have some conversations with letting agents that are maybe having trouble getting their landlord to spend money on their property, and therefore they'd be quite happy to see someone else take ownership of it, someone that's prepared to invest in it. Maybe there's a perfect property for you to multi-let with a landlord only single-letting it, where you can offer them the fixed single-let rate and you can multi-let it. So really is important for you to identify with and understand where there's a property opportunity that you can pick out and start to work with and build relationships with the agents to create the right opportunity and right deal for you, but at the same time for the seller or the landlord. Just by identifying with some of the properties that are on the market, either for sale or for let. So where might you look next? Well, for many people, property opportunities come in the way of auctions and repossession companies, things that have already been repossessed. Now, auctions are a great source of opportunity, and you want to be able to make sure that you understand how auctions work before you start buying at auction. Because in an auction, sometimes your emotions can get away with you, and you might end up paying more for the property than you'd already or originally intended. So if you haven't been to an auction before, I would really encourage you to get along to your local auction, find out how it works, what's happening at the auction, have a little look at the catalogue. I'd encourage you to look at it and see if there's a few opportunities in there that you would consider. Don't go with the intention to spend your money, go with the intention to just explore and educate yourself. They can be very lucrative, but they can also be very expensive if you don't know what you're doing. But it is a very good way to pick up some bargains when it comes to properties. It is, however, essential that you know what you're looking for. So if you're buying, it's really essential that you do your research and you look at more than just the cheap properties. Make sure that you've gone to see it. Make sure that you get the pack on it. Understand what's in the pack. There's always a pack with each property. Get your solicitor to check it if you're serious about getting a property at auction. There are a lot of auction rules in terms of the purchase process. So make sure that you have checked out all of the rules and that you understand what your commitment is, because as soon as that hammer goes down, you'll have to buy, and you only have so many days to buy it in. So you need to make sure that you've got the finance in place. And there are some really good opportunities, so I definitely encourage you to get along to your local auction. It's also a really good way to sell property, the right kind of property, but it's essential that you understand what works at auction and what doesn't. So by going along to the auction and starting to identify with what happens and how it works, It'll really help educate you around where you can pick up the bargains on the properties that are in auction. And sometimes the cheapest ones aren't always the best ones to bid on, because that tends to be where everyone is looking. They're looking at the cheap end of the market, and so there's a lot of competition. So it may be something that you look at, but don't forget to go and look at some of the others, because there could be an opportunity in there that no one else is bidding on, but the seller is prepared to sell. It could be that it doesn't sell at auction and you wait, and because you've done all your research and you've looked at it and you know what it's about, that you can put an offer in after the auction because you've already done all the legwork on it. But one thing to make sure is don't bid on something that you haven't been to see and that you haven't already done your research on. That's what novice investors do, and that's not something that you are. So you're educating yourself. Make sure that you educate yourself around the individual properties that you start to bid on. Because sometimes the picture in the catalogue isn't actually the reality of the property itself. When it comes to repossessions, there are a number of repossession companies out there and people that will sell repossession properties. There are companies that will work with estate agents to sell repossession properties. And if you look at what is in your area, you'll find that there are companies that are generally operating around your area and working with estate agents to sell repossession properties. There are lots of different websites, and the same for auctions. There's the EIG group, which does a lot of the property auctions. They cover the biggest range of property auctions around the country. They do have a fee for joining them, so you can't do that for free, but you can get information on auctions through other sites online. So there's auction houses like Allsop, which is allsop.co.uk, and Savills, Bar and Marcus, where they have different information on auctions and also some repossession information. Some of the other repossession websites, things like propertyearth.net. That's another way to look up some repossession properties. You can enter a town and a price limit of things that you're looking for, and you can find properties that have been repossessed. There's other fairly new websites like whitehotproperty.co.uk, and there's a whole range of different websites, that not only websites that are free, but also websites that you have to pay for. So depending on how much you want to find the property will depend on which route you decide that you're going to go. But certainly auctions and repossessions are definitely places where you can pick up bargains. It's really worthwhile getting to know how it works first before you go in and buy. The repossession companies will give it to an agent, it'll go on the market, and very often there's a process. If there's no bids within a certain period of time, they'll reduce the price after a number of days. And the more that you can study that process, the more familiar you will get with when that happens. And you'll know whether they're going to accept an offer and at what point they'll accept an offer. So really taking the time to get to understand the process and how it works and where you can pick up bargain properties will really help you if you can focus on one or two of these things. Other places that you can think about finding bargain properties, as well as the different websites, you'll find that there are different property opportunities in commercial, pubs, restaurant, guest houses, different things that you can think outside the box with. What else could you do with these things? There are a number of pubs around where they're not really working as pubs anymore. They're not really working as restaurants. Some of the guest houses don't really work as guest houses anymore. Because things have changed in the way that we live our lives, the demand for some of these things aren't there so much anymore, and therefore there's an opportunity for you to potentially do something with these. So have a little look around you. Sometimes these things are on your doorstep. You know, there's universities that are changing the way that they do things. Universities used to have hostels, and they don't use a lot of those hostels anymore because they built new accommodation. You know, is there something that you can do with those types of opportunities? because those are the kind of opportunities that you can really negotiate some great prices on. If you can just be a little bit creative. And it doesn't even require you to be creative. It could be that you get someone in your team that's creative, that you can work with to make sure that you can create the opportunities and you can think outside the box to get a really great investment for the future, or an investment that you can trade on and sell and make some money from. You don't have to buy them. You could look to offer a lease on them. You know, if these things are empty, if they're not doing anything or they're not trading so well, it could be that the owners of them would actually be really relieved to have somebody else take some responsibility for it. And because they're commercial, they're already quite familiar normally with the process of leasing. And therefore, there might be an opportunity for you to do a lease option on something where you can lease it first and then maybe have the opportunity to buy it in the future. And if it didn't work, as long as you do the right kind of deal, then you've got nothing to lose. The other thing that you might want to do is look at your local council and find out what's going on in your local area through the council. Empty houses is definitely a target area for the local council, and see what sort of schemes they're running. You know, there's all sorts of different landlord forums and groups that the council have running that you could tap into where there's property opportunities. Whether that be for an opportunity with a house or some other type of building that the council no longer use or want to put back into use for something. By exploring with the council what's going on in your area, you can really find different opportunities that no one else is looking at. And you could be doing something good for the community and the local area as well as something good for yourself. So remember to look right in front of you, because sometimes right in front of you is where the opportunities lie. Think outside the box so that you're being creative, so that you're thinking more than what other people are doing. You're looking at new ways to use old buildings. And once you've done that, take a couple of these ideas and add them to your weekly lead generation. If you haven't already got a weekly lead generation, then create one. This is things that you should be doing every week in, week out, over a consistently long period of time. You should have 3 to 5 things on this every week that you're doing. If you're looking for properties at auction, you should be looking through the auction house catalogues. You should be going online or getting a membership with EIG Group so that you can look at the auction information and see what's happening in your area every single week, so that you can track the progress. You can see what's selling, what's not selling. If it's not auctions, perhaps there's something that you're doing with, you know, the local pubs and guest houses and things in your area that are not doing anything. And what can you be doing to progress those? Can you be writing to people, sending out a couple of letters every week, to be trying to make contact with people that might be interested in doing something with their property that they're no longer doing, or maybe they are, but they want a solution to, and you can offer that solution. So create your weekly lead generation and get things added to it. 3 to 5 things. The more that you have on there, the better. But for most people, they're doing other things at the same time. And therefore, I would say 3 to 5 things each and every week that you can track that you're going to do and you commit to do every single week. That will mean that you will get the results that you want. And just check them off when you've done them. And the results will definitely come. So what are the actions that you need to take? I would encourage you to select 2 ways of finding bargain properties. So you might already be out there finding motivated sellers. You want to target some bargain properties as well. So where can you find some bargain properties? Open up your eyes and look around you. So what are 2 ways that you can find bargain properties? Add them to your weekly lead generation. And start doing it on a weekly basis. Start making contact, start progressing and looking at tracking this week in, week out, the action that you're taking. So find 2 ways that you can target bargain properties. Add it to your weekly lead generation and start tracking that progress. Track it for at least 12 weeks to see how the progress and the results come along, and then change it or adapt it, amend it if it's not working for you. But give it a fair chance, and you will absolutely get the success that you want, and you'll achieve the goals that you want. So that's looking at bargain properties, and I hope that you're now able to go out there and find some opportunities that you can really create some fantastic investments from. And I look forward to working with you and speaking to you in another Property Mentor module.